You were the kind one, and the one who stayed when others walked away, the one who gave when no one asked, the one who forgave even when it hurt. And deep down, you thought that made you strong. But what if I told you that very kindness became the reason they took advantage of you? That the same heart you were proud of became the place where others learned they could cross every line without consequence. This isn't just a message, it's a mirror. Because if you've ever felt drained, overlooked, or quietly broken while still smiling for others, then this is for you. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you won't just understand what happened to you, you'll see why it had to happen. You didn't notice it at first. It didn't feel like something dangerous or harmful. In fact, it felt noble. It felt right. Being there for others, putting their needs before your own, showing up even when you were tired, it all made you feel like you were doing what a good person is supposed to do. You believed that if you gave enough, loved enough, and stayed patient enough, everything would eventually balance out. That people would see your heart and treat you with the same care you gave them. But slowly, something began to shift. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly. You started saying yes when you wanted to say no. You started ignoring your own discomfort just to keep the peace. You let things slide that deep down didn't sit right with you. And each time you did that, a small part of you stepped back, making more space for others to step forward without ever asking if they should. It wasn't that people suddenly became cruel, it's that they became comfortable. Comfortable expecting you to always be available. Comfortable knowing you wouldn't push back. Comfortable taking a little more each time because you never gave them a reason to stop. And the hardest truth is, they didn't have to force anything. You offered it willingly, believing that this is what love, loyalty, and kindness were supposed to look like. There's a quiet kind of pain in realizing that your own goodness played a role in your exhaustion, not because kindness is wrong, but because you were never taught where it should end. You were never taught that protecting your energy is just as important as giving it. So you kept pouring even when your own cup was running empty. You kept showing up even when no one showed up for you in the same way. And over time, you started to feel it, the weight of being everything for everyone, the frustration of not being understood, the silent question that kept echoing in your mind, why doesn't anyone treat me the way I treat them? That question doesn't come from weakness, it comes from a deep imbalance that's been ignored for too long. What you gave was real, your intentions were pure, but without limits, even the most beautiful qualities can be taken for granted. When there are no boundaries, people don't learn where the line is, they assume there isn't one. And when that happens, your kindness stops being respected and starts being expected. This is where everything begins to change. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in awareness. In finally seeing that being a good person doesn't mean sacrificing yourself, that you can care deeply without abandoning your own needs, that you can be kind without allowing yourself to be diminished. Because the truth is, your value was never meant to be proven through how much you can endure. It was meant to be protected by how much you're willing to honor yourself. And the moment you begin to understand that is the moment you start taking your power back. At some point, you started choosing silence over honesty, not because you didn't have something to say, but because you didn't want to create tension. You didn't want to be seen as difficult, ungrateful, or too much. So instead of speaking up when something hurt you, you swallowed it. You convinced yourself it wasn't a big deal. You told yourself, it's okay, I'll let it go. But what you were really doing was teaching people that your feelings could be overlooked without consequence. You thought your patience would be appreciated, that your ability to stay calm, to not react, to not argue, would earn you respect, but that's not how it unfolded. Instead, your silence became something others relied on. They got used to the idea that no matter what they did or said, you would remain the same. You wouldn't challenge them. You wouldn't hold them accountable. And over time, that quiet endurance turned into an unspoken agreement, one where your voice slowly disappeared. The truth is, people don't always recognize unspoken pain. They recognize what is shown to them. And what you showed was tolerance. You showed that you could handle it, that you would adjust, that you would continue to be there no matter how things felt on your side. So they didn't see the internal struggle. They didn't see the moments where you questioned your worth or the nights where you replayed conversations in your head wishing you had said something different. All they saw was someone who would stay. There's a deep misunderstanding here. Staying quiet is often mistaken for strength, when in reality, it can sometimes come from fear. Fear of losing people, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. And those fears can be powerful enough to keep you silent even when every part of you is asking to be heard. You start prioritizing peace over truth, not realizing that the kind of peace built on silence is fragile. It doesn't last. It only grows heavier. And the more you stayed quiet, the easier it became for others to overlook your boundaries, because they didn't even know where those boundaries were. You never expressed them. You never made them visible. So how could they respect something they were never shown? This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it reveals a pattern, one where your silence unintentionally gave them room to continue without reflection. Eventually, that silence begins to turn inward. It becomes frustration, resentment, emotional exhaustion. You start feeling unheard, even though you never truly allowed yourself to be heard. And that realization can be painful. It forces you to confront the fact that your voice matters, and that by holding it back, you've been denying yourself the respect you were hoping to receive from others. But this is where your power begins to return. The moment you understand that your voice is not something to hide, it's something to protect. Speaking up doesn't make you difficult. Expressing your feelings doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. It makes your presence honest. Because the right people won't fear your voice, they will respect it. And the moment you begin to speak with clarity, even if your voice shakes, you start rewriting the way people experience you. Not as someone who silently endures everything, but as someone who knows their worth and is no longer afraid to show it. You always tried to see the best in people, even when the signs were right in front of you, even when something felt off. You chose to focus on what could be instead of what actually was. You told yourself they were just misunderstood, just going through something, just needing a little more time, a little more patience, a little more love. And because of that, you kept giving chances long after the situation had already shown you the truth. It didn't come from weakness, it came from hope, a deep belief that people can grow, that they can change, that if someone is shown enough care, they will eventually rise to meet it. And there's something beautiful about that belief. It speaks to your depth, your empathy, your ability to look beyond the surface. But the problem begins when that belief blinds you, when you start holding on to a version of someone that exists only in your imagination while ignoring the version that's standing right in front of you. There were moments, clear ones, where their actions didn't match their words, moments where they disappointed you, where they crossed lines, where they made you feel small or unimportant. And in those moments, you felt it, that quiet discomfort, that inner voice telling you something isn't right. But instead of listening to it, you softened it. You explained it away. You made excuses for them even when they never asked you to. You weren't just understanding them, you were protecting them from the consequences of their own behavior. And in doing that, you placed yourself in a position where your needs became secondary. You became more focused on their potential than your own well-being, more invested in who they might become than how they were treating you in the present. This is where things start to hurt in a deeper way. Because when you finally begin to see things clearly, it doesn't just feel like disappointment, it feels like betrayal. Not just from them, but from the part of you that kept ignoring the truth. You start to question yourself. How did I not see this sooner? But the reality is, you did see it. You just didn't want to believe it. There's a difference between giving someone a chance and giving them unlimited access to hurt you. One comes from strength, the other from self-neglect. And when those lines get blurred, you end up staying in situations that slowly drain you, all while telling yourself you're doing the right thing. Understanding this doesn't mean you stop believing in people. It doesn't mean you become cold or distant. It simply means you begin to see people as they are, not just as who they could be. You start paying attention to actions, not just words. You begin to trust what you feel instead of constantly overriding it with hope. Because the truth is, someone who truly values you won't need endless chances to prove it. They won't rely on your patience to cover their lack of effort. They will show up consistently in ways that don't leave you questioning where you stand. And the moment you start accepting people for who they are instead of who you wish they were, everything becomes clearer. You stop chasing potential and start choosing peace. There comes a moment when something inside you quietly shifts. It's not loud, not dramatic, but it's real. You begin to feel tired in a way that rest can't fix, not physically, but emotionally. The constant giving, the constant understanding, the constant showing up, it starts to feel heavy. And for the first time, you don't immediately rush to fix it. You pause. That pause changes everything. You begin to pull your energy back just a little. You stop over-explaining. You stop reaching out first every single time. You stop trying to hold everything together on your own. And what happens next is something you didn't expect, but deep down, you always feared. Things begin to fall apart. The same people who were comfortable receiving everything from you suddenly feel distant. The effort they once showed, if there was any, starts to fade. Conversations become shorter. Their presence becomes inconsistent. The warmth you thought was real begins to feel conditional. And that's when it hits you. It was never about you as a person. It was about what you provided. That realization can feel like a quiet heartbreak because you weren't pretending. Your care was real. Your intentions were genuine. But when you stopped giving at the same level, the connection didn't hold. It didn't deepen. It didn't fight to stay. It simply weakened. And that tells you everything you need to know. Real connection doesn't disappear the moment you take a step back. Real care doesn't depend on constant access to your energy. When something is genuine, it adjusts, it understands, it makes space for you, just like you always made space for others. But what you experienced was different. It was one-sided, even if it didn't look like it at first. You start replaying things in your mind, the times you went out of your way, the moments you put your own needs aside, the effort you gave without hesitation, and then you compare it to what happened when you simply stopped doing all of that, and the contrast is undeniable. This is where clarity replaces confusion. You're no longer guessing how they feel about you. You're no longer trying to interpret mixed signals. Their response to your absence speaks louder than anything they ever said in your presence. And while that truth may hurt, it also frees you, because now you're no longer holding on to an illusion. Letting go of that illusion is not easy. It means accepting that some connections were never as deep as you believed. It means facing the reality that you were giving more than you were receiving. But it also means you're finally seeing things as they are, not as you hoped they would be. And in that clarity, something powerful begins to grow. You start to understand that your energy is valuable, that your presence is not something to be taken lightly, that if someone only shows up when you're giving everything, then they were never truly there for you. They were there for the benefit. So instead of chasing what faded, you begin to stand still. You stop trying to revive what only existed because of your effort, and in doing so, you create space for something real, something mutual, something balanced, something that doesn't disappear the moment you choose yourself. Because the truth is, anything that falls apart when you stop overgiving was never built to last in the first place. Something changes the moment you begin to choose where your energy goes, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady shift that starts from within. You no longer feel the need to give everything to everyone. You no longer feel responsible for fixing every situation or carrying every emotional weight that comes your way. Instead, you start to pause. You start to ask yourself a simple question: is this being valued or just consumed? For the first time, your kindness is no longer automatic, it becomes intentional. You begin to understand that not everyone deserves the same version of you. Some people deserve your full presence, your patience, your care. Others only deserve distance, not out of anger, not out of resentment, but out of awareness. You've learned what happens when you give without limits, and you're no longer willing to repeat that cycle. At first, this shift feels uncomfortable. You might feel guilty for saying no. You might question yourself for stepping back. There's a part of you that still wants to go back to who you used to be, the one who gave without thinking, the one who never held back. But deep down, you know that version of you was slowly losing themselves just to keep others comfortable. So you stay firm. Feel like loss at first, it's actually clarity. Because the ones who truly value you won't be threatened by your boundaries. They will respect them. They will understand that your time, your energy, your presence all have value. They won't expect you to give endlessly without receiving anything in return. They will meet you halfway. They will show consistency, not just when it benefits them, but because they genuinely care. This is where your power begins to take shape. Not in how much you give, but in how wisely you give. Not in how available you are, but in how aligned you are with what feels right for you. You stop trying to prove your worth through sacrifice and start honoring it through self-respect. You no longer chase connection. You attract it by being grounded in who you are. You don't feel the need to hold on to people who don't see your value because you finally learned to see it yourself. And that changes everything. Because when your kindness becomes selective, it doesn't lose its beauty. It gains strength. It becomes something that is appreciated, not expected, something that is respected, not overlooked. You are still kind. You are still giving. You are still everything you were before, but now there's wisdom behind it. Now there's awareness guiding it. Now there's a boundary protecting it. And that is the difference between being used and being valued. In the end, this was never about them. It was about you waking up to yourself, about realizing that your kindness was never the problem. It was the lack of protection around it. You gave from a pure place, and there is nothing wrong with that. But now you understand that even the purest heart needs boundaries, needs awareness, needs strength behind its softness. You've seen what happens when you ignore your own needs. You felt the weight of being everything for people who were only there for what you could offer. And while that truth may have hurt, it also taught you something powerful. It taught you that your value is not measured by how much you can endure, but by how much you're willing to respect yourself. So you don't harden, you evolve. You don't stop being kind, you become wiser with it. You don't close your heart. You simply stop handing it to those who don't know how to hold it. And from this moment forward, everything changes. The way you show up, the way you connect, the way you protect your peace, it all comes from a place of understanding, not obligation. You no longer give to be accepted. You give where it's deserved. Because you were never too kind. You were just giving your light to people who were never meant to stand in it.